Bowen Byram is reportedly available from the Buffalo Sabres. Should the Sharks be interested?
You're Locked On Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to Locked On Sharks, the premier hockey podcast covering your favorite team in the Bay Area. My name is JD Young, caretaker at the Reef, also the co-host of Locked On NHL. I want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen. Proudly part of the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. If you want to be an everydayer, all you have to do is just follow wherever you get podcasts, or you can watch on YouTube as well. And today we're going to be exploring Bowen Byram trade, the Buffalo Sabres defenseman. We're going to be talking about why the Sharks should kind of be buyers, why Byram makes a ton of sense for the Sharks if they want to be buyers at the trade deadline, get to know him, and more importantly, talk about what a trade and a new contract would look like. So let's start with why I think kind of the big thing is why I think the Sharks should be buyers. And I'm not saying like go out and get Brock Nelson or some aging, rental veteran. Like that's not smart, right, for the Sharks. But trying to find guys who are maybe getting squeezed out, maybe underutilized, maybe just don't fit. Guys who are still either ascending or starting to hit their peaks. Like those type of players, right? That the Sharks should be very much interested in trying to acquire, because one, they're still trying to build their team for the future. Two, you have all the assets in the world, including a brand spanking new first round pick from the Dallas Stars in what's considered a pretty weak draft class. And three, you also have all the cap space in the world that you're going to have to spend at some point. So I think for the Sharks, like you should 100% continue to trade off like assets that aren't going to be like here long term. And we talked about some of those guys earlier this week. Your Luke Cunnins or potentially Mario Ferraros, like those type of guys who maybe you don't picture being here long term. Like the Sharks should 100% look to trade those. But guys like Bowen Byram, who we're going to continue to talk about here in a second, these are the type of players that the Sharks 100% should be in on because it fits their timeline, right? Yes, Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith are, 18 and 19 years old. But most of your other prospects are, kind of in that early 20-ish range. You look at William Eklund who's 22, and, like Mukhamadullin and like a bunch of these other guys who are, early 20s. Like you still want, I think, guys that are kind of in that early to mid 20s range who are NHL players. So let's look at Bowen Byram, who the Buffalo Sabres reportedly are looking to trade either Bowen Byram or Owen Power. We're going to look at Byram today because I think, one, he's not going to be as expensive. And two, I think it makes, like, between the two of them, I think he's the one who kind of gets moved. So he's a former 4th overall pick in the 2019 draft class, originally drafted by the Colorado Avalanche. And early in his career, had injury issues, suffered a ton of concussions, and like definitely hampered his development as he was kind of coming up through the system, et cetera, et cetera. Really struggled with those injuries. And actually it wasn't really until his trade to the Buffalo Sabres, or he was traded for Casey Middlestat, that he really kind of found his ground here. But why would the Sabres want to trade him, right? And I think the big thing is you look at how their contracts are right now. The Buffalo Sabres, of course, you have Rasmus Dahlin, who's 24, in a $11 million contract. Owen Power, who's 22, just started an $8.35 million contract. Matthias Samuelsson, who's on 24, he's in the middle of a $4.2 million contract. Then you get to Byram, who's in the last year of his $3.85 million deal. And he's an RFA. You have Connor Clifton, and then, you have some other guys here as well. But the Buffalo Sabres are spending a lot of money on their blue line. And Bowen Byram needs a new deal. Like, he is an RFA this year with arbitration rights. And we'll get to the contract later, but he is in line to get a new deal. Just how expensive, like how much are the Sabres spending? They are currently second in the NHL when it comes to percentage of cap spent on the defense at 41%. The only team more expensive is the Utah Hockey Club. And the reason that is because they have Shea Weber's contract on the books on IR, where they took his contracts a couple seasons ago and were able to kind of get some money or a draft pick or something like that for it. So Shea Weber, who's still in the contract for $7.8 million, almost $7.9 million for this season, next season, hasn't played a game since the bubble season. When was the last time he played? He's done, right? He's basically just riding out his contract right now. So for all intents and purposes, the Sabres have the most expensive blue line in the NHL, and they got to pay Bowen Byram coming up. Now, that would be great if you were, if you look at some of the other teams that have expensive blue lines, we Sharks fans, right? We had Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, Mark-Edouard Vlasic. We had a really expensive blue line at one point, which is, they went to a Western Conference Finals with that blue line, and we know what eventually happened after that. But you look at the rest of those teams kind of in that expense, like the Blues, who we know, like the Blues, they're still kind of riding out some of the contracts from their glory days, which is fine. Colorado Avalanche, their blue line contracts make up 35% of the cap. Pretty good team. Vegas Golden Knights, 35% of their defense or their contracts go to their defense. Like, okay, that team's stacked defensively. The Blue Jackets, okay, the Dallas Stars, that's a good team. Like you get the picture, right? If you're going to pay that much money for your defense, it should be good, or your team should be good. Last we checked, Buffalo Sabres aren't very good this year, right? And there's been a lot of talk, of course, of how are they going to try to fix this? This is the fourth worst team in the NHL when it comes to point percentage. This team was expected to make the jump. Like, they're going to have to make some big changes, right? And one of those changes is you're going to have to probably reallocate some of your money that you're spending on the blue line, which is, of course, not kind of holding. I don't want to say it's not holding up its end, but like, this team is in drastic need of a shakeup to try to make the playoffs. So if you're the Sabres, why would you commit long-term to a guy while you're still trying to, this team is probably going to make some big changes this offseason. So for them, trading a guy like Bowen Byram, who they probably don't want to pay long-term, try to get some assets back. That way they can go be aggressive this offseason. Like, they have plenty of cap space. Like, don't get me wrong. If they really, really wanted to spend, they could easily afford to spend on Bowen Byram and what his projected cap is going to be, or his projected contract is going to be. This team has almost $34 million of cap space going into the off season. Like, they have plenty, they're going to have to make some decisions, like Jason Zucker is a free agent. Jordan Greenway's a free agent. Ryan McLeod's an RFA. Like, they're going to have to make some decisions there. They have John Jason Paterka and Jack Quinn are both young guys who are RFAs, are going to be due for new contracts here. They do have to make some decisions there. But they have, if they want to spend money on Bowen Byram, they totally can. But I think for them, this team is going to change a lot over this offseason. And I think trying to get assets now to give yourself more room and leverage to do things later, I think is kind of the play for why they should, or why they're looking to trade one of these defensemen. And I think Bowen Byram is probably the easiest guy to trade with his contract, what it currently is right now. So let's get to know Byram, what he would potentially bring to the San Jose Sharks. And of course, talk about what a trade would potentially look like. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets through the game, and if you miss the opening tip-off, you just want to bet on fourth quarter action, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I always love just betting on Steph Curry to do Steph Curry things, because there's nothing more exciting in the NBA than when Steph Curry goes on a run. Plus, when Steph Curry does cool things, the app makes it super easy to use, and more importantly, you get paid instantly when you win. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, before we get to Byram and we kind of dig into his analytics, profile, all that fun stuff, of course, want to thank you guys for making a Locked On Sharks your first listen. If you haven't, now's a perfect time to subscribe, especially if you're watching on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, get notifications. That way, when you know new episodes come out, we'll continue our draft coverage next week. We got another draft profile all lined up. It's one of the big four, so we'll just keep it at that. And if you're listening on Apple, wherever you get podcasts, make sure you hit subscribe, leave a nice review. It does help. So, all right, Bowen Byram, let's get to know him. So, Byram, 6'1", 205-pound defenseman, left-handed. I can already feel the eye rolling. Why would you get another left-handed defenseman? I'm just trying to get good players. So, he's 23, turns 24 here pretty soon. 1 year left on his $3.85 million AAV. So he is an RFA at the end of this season with arbitration rights. We'll get to the contract here in a little bit. This season, he's played 54 games, has 7 goals, 22 assists, 66 shots on goal, averaging 23.09 average time on ice, Corsi for 49.85%, goals for 57.45%. So when he is on the ice, the Sabres take 49.85% of the shot attempts, and they also score 57.45% of the goals when he is on the ice. Looking at his evolving hockey card, he plays top line defense minutes. He's a 77th percentile player, 76th percentile offensively, 59th percentile defensively. Doesn't get the full, he plays on the power play, but it's usually kind of second line minutes. Does play a lot of shorthanded minutes as well. Something to keep in mind. His defensive partner this season, he has spent half his time at even strength playing with Rasmus Dahlin. Rasmus Dahlin, pretty good at hockey. Last time I checked, well worth his $11 million contract. Rasmus Dahlin is a stud. So something to keep in mind. He is playing with one of the best defensemen, especially young defensemen in the NHL right now with Rasmus Dahlin. So that does help the numbers a little bit, but still, Bowen Byram, it's not like he's, just riding Dahlin's cape here. But just want to keep that in mind for context here. So looking at his hockey stat card, this season, 3.3 offensive rating, which is 80th percentile, right around there. 0.4% defensive rating, which is 60th percentile. 3.7% net rating, again, kind of in that 75, 80th percentile right there. So he's a good player. Like, he is a very good player. It provides offense. Again, maybe I think the defense, maybe not as high, but he's still a positive defenseman. Like, he's still a good defenseman. So looking at his usage card, he does get deployed against tough competition, but does usually kind of get more offensive zone starts and averages out to a kind of a top 4 two-way defenseman, which is what the Sharks need, right? Looking at what Bowen Byram does with his all 3 zones card. Again, another one of those, like we just talked about earlier this week, like guys who are really good at getting the puck out of their zone. Bowen Byram is really good at getting the puck out of his zone. Like we talked about with Noah Dobson. Defensive zone retrievals, X's per 60, like all this stuff of like just getting the puck and getting it going are excellent indicators of what he is good. And again, does play with Rasmus Dahlin, so you do see like the offense is down a little bit because he's not generating as much. Because again, when you defer to Rasmus Dahlin, it makes a lot of sense. But he's good at zone entries. He's good at getting the puck out of the zone. Like zone entry defense, maybe not as high as you would like, but I think when given the chance to shine, I think maybe the zone entries decline or exits decline a little bit, but I think the offense would definitely increase if he's kind of given the reins to a team that you would expect. So Bowen Byram is like a really good player, right? He was the 4th overall pick in that 2019 draft. Like the Avalanche had a lot of hope for him. And I know early on in his career, injuries derailed him. Like it happens, but thankfully it seems like he's kind of gotten over those concussions and all the lingering symptoms, and he's put together good play with the Buffalo Sabres. And again, like I know they have Owen Power, they have Rasmus Dahlin. Like there's a reason why like those guys were also high picks. You know, both those guys were 1st overall picks. This guy just a measly 4th overall pick in the draft. But it feels like this could be a guy where maybe if given the opportunity to shine elsewhere, where you are kind of the guy, maybe we see him kind of take another step. And I think that's potentially a risk worth taking for the Sharks, who, yes, I know you have Sam Dickinson and you're well aligned to draft Matthew Schaefer 1st overall, like in the draft. And that's fine. Like you can have good players, and maybe you run into the same issue that the Sabres are running into, where you have too many good defensemen and you have to trade one. And that's a problem for future Sharks when, you know, again, like ELC, like that's 3+ years down the road when ELCs like legitimately kick in and stuff, right? Like that is massive, or there's ways to figure things out, right? So for the Sharks, who do need a number 1 defenseman, Byram has all the makings of being a number 1 defenseman. And I think he's just not given the opportunity to shine because of, again, Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, who are both on this team getting first crack at it. So I think for the Sharks, he would slide into your first number. Like right now, he would be your best defenseman on your team. Jake Wallman would go to your second pairing, and like it would help the pecking order, I think. I know the big problem, of course, is he's left-handed, and the Sharks have 1,000 left-handed defensemen in the prospect pool. And again, probably going to be draft if they get the 1st overall pick, probably going to be drafting another top-end left-handed defenseman. I think these guys can figure it out, right? You can figure it out. If some guys to play on their offhand, these guys are too skilled. Like we saw Jake Wallman playing on his offhand. Like these guys can play on their offhand. It's not the end of the world. So again, the Sharks at this point just need good players, and you can't be picky. So let's look at what a potential trade would look like, and more importantly, what a new contract would look like. So we'll get to that here in just 1 second. All right. Before we get to trade contract, of course want to thank you for making Locked On Sharks your first listen For your second listen, go check out one of the other great shows here at the Locked On Network. You can check out Locked On Fantasy Hockey. If your fantasy hockey team needs some help, they got you covered there. Go check out any of the shows here in the Bay Area. Locked On A's, Locked On Warriors, Locked On Giants, Locked On Niners. Plenty of great stuff here at the Locked On Network. We cover your team every day. All right, we'll start with the trade part. And I think this has to, again, it's tough to know what the Sabres want right now, assuming that they're going to try to kind of retool here quickly, whether it's going for a big swing, who knows what the Sabres actually want. Their prospect pool is really solid, especially in the forward group. They've drafted a lot of forwards recently. They have forwards who are really kind of starting to pan out. Defensively, okay-ish, So I think, of course, it starts with the first round pick, right? The Dallas pick is the first thing in it. Do you then look at a guy like Shakir Mukhamadullin, who maybe doesn't have the same ceiling as Bowen Byram, right? But maybe he fits with what the Sabres are looking for, where one, he's cost controlled, right? He's just finishing up his ELC. He's going to have several years of RFA. He's not projected to be a kind of top end defenseman. So maybe if he's your third, fourth, fifth defenseman and you have those other two guys, maybe he fits more of what they're looking for. And maybe you have to throw something else in there as well. I think that's kind of the starting point, right? And that gives the Sabres another asset that they can turn around and flip to do something else this offseason when they're trying to make a big splash, right? They're going to have a top 5 pick. Maybe they want to use that pick. Maybe they want to turn around and go big game hunting with it. Cool. More power to you. And again, as we've talked about, you want to pick in the top 4, right? The top 4, you feel like you're getting a really good player. After that, it definitely gets a little bit dicier. So if the Sabres do end up out of the top 4, are they more likely to take that, 5th, 6th pick in the draft and then go try to do, instead of picking with it, go trade it for a superstar or a star type of player. And then that gives them a little bit more ammo with that first round pick, having 2 first round picks in this draft. Again, I'm just thinking out loud here what the Sabres are going to try to do. But I do think they're going to be really aggressive this offseason because they've missed the playoffs for a bajillion years in a row. So, and clearly the core they have isn't working. So, okay, let's just say it's something like that, right? Whether it's or even Ferraro. Again, if Ferraro's your 4th, 5th defenseman, but the problem is Ferraro also needs a new contract. His contract isn't expected. He is cost controlled for another season. His contract isn't going to be anywhere near the Bowen Byram type of deal. So maybe you're just kind of be like, hey, we got you for a year at 3.25. Let's ride with this, see what happens. And then if next season we can either flip you trade you at the deadline, or we can extend you with, 4 years by $4 million type of contract or something like that. So again, thinking out loud, what does Mr. Byram's next contract look like? So AFP Analytics, they did a midterm contract with the salary cap expected to be at 95.5. The nice thing is they actually did 2 for Byram. They did a short term. So if you were, as a 24-year-old, you only wanted to sign him to a 2-year deal. And they also did a long-term contract. So let's start with a short-term contract. So again, he's making $3.85 million this year, RFA with arbitration rights. He is projecting to get a raise. You can re-sign him for a 2-year deal at, we'll just say, $10.5 million total. So an AAV of 5.25 or 5 whatever million. So 10.5 divided by 2. Yeah, 5.25, whatever. So somewhere in that range, right? Where it does get a little bit of a bump, gives you 2 years, So I would put him as age 26 season, and then you can kind of do something else with it. I would be, if you think this is the guy, and I think he's very good, I would be more willing to lock him up long term, especially for the price point that they have. They have him signing a 7-year deal at 7.3, so a total of 51 million basically for 7 years. So that would put him through his age 31 season, 24 plus 7, 31. 32. At 7, basically 7, 7.2, $7.3 million a season. You could do the 8 years, maybe gets bumped up a little bit. You're probably looking like 7.5 million a season or something like that. But still, while I know, again, that sticker shock of we just cleaned up our cap books. We can't, I just cleaned up this mess. We can't get it back messy again. I'll make the same argument, right? Sharks have $1 bajillion to spend. They have to spend at least $20 million just to get to the cap floor. And I think now's the time to kind of take on one of these contracts, like a big deal contract, when you have so many ELCs on the book, right? And even if we're projecting Schaefer and Dickinson to just come in and be monsters and they get massive contracts at some point, again, those are 3 or 4 years down the line, right? We know the cap in 3 years is going to be at 110 million. By the time those guys are going to be needing deals, the cap could be looking at 120 or something like that. And a $7.5 million deal now is going to feel like a $4 million deal then, if that makes sense, right? The cap is just going to be going up so much. I feel like now's the time to kind of lock in some of these guys before the cap explodes so much. And then you're going to be looking at some of these deals, like the McCarr deal right now. McCarr deal feels like pennies, especially compared to what some of these other guys are going to be getting paid. And yes, Cale Makar's going to get rich really soon, as soon as he signs his next deal. And I'm not saying Byram is Cale Makar or anything like that, but getting these guys locked in now while you can before the cap explodes and they start asking for that percentage of cap deal, I think is a smart play. And then if Byram becomes, your third defenseman with Dickinson and Schaefer, those guys, by the time those guys are kind of hitting their prime, Byram's contract is going to be starting to kind of, you're going to be kind of getting ready to, move on from that contract, or it's going to be kind of weaning itself out or aging itself out, I guess. So I would be okay with that. I would actually be more likely to sign a pushing to sign a long-term deal, because I think in the long run, you're going to save money compared to playing the Doug Wilson. We're going to do the 4-year bridge deal, and then you're 28, and then we got to sign you to an 8-year deal. And all of a sudden, now we have Logan Couture signed for 8 years and Tomas Hertl signed for 8 years and Mark-Edward Vlasic signed for 8 years through their mid-30s. I'd rather do the big deal first, and then you do the little deals like the bridge deal type of, the 3-4 year deals after that, when they're starting to hit their mid-30s. And then if you need to get out of those deals, it's much easier to get out of those deals than it is to try to get out of them. Yeah, that's what I would do. Anyway, but I'm just an idiot, as I've said more than one occasion on this show. So that's going to be it for me today. We'll be back on Monday. We'll probably look at some of the Barracuda guys who might be itching for a call up here soon. We'll probably look at that. We got another draft profile lined up. Like I said, one of the big 4 lined up for next week. So plenty of fun, good stuff coming up. So make sure, if you haven't, perfect time to subscribe, especially on YouTube. Follow along wherever you get podcasts. And of course, like I said, watch on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Locked On Sharks. Follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky at My Fry Hole. Until Monday. Bye, friends.